This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stand-Up Comedy, host and MC, and I really enjoy interviewing my old friends, the comics from the past, 80s and the 90s, and we are in for a treat because one of those guys that I always enjoyed, was always terrific with the audience, and had some material that sticks with me and my bride to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, it's professional comic Cash Levy. Wow, the crowd goes nuts. Cash, we haven't talked in a while, but it's great to hear your voice. Sounds like life is going well.
Everything's going well, Scott, and it's good to catch up with you again too. We were able to catch up a little bit before the show started, but I was excited to hear from you because I do think back fondly of meeting you, and you were sort of instrumental in sort of giving me my start. I started doing your clubs when I was just at the very beginning, and you had 3 clubs.
Yeah, 3 clubs at the peak of my comedy success.
And I'll never forget, Scott. I've never told you this, so I'm going to tell you a few things I've never told you before. But I'll never forget, you gave me, I worked for you one time, did some guest sets, and then I think you gave me like 6 weeks of work, like 2 in each club. And, there were opening spots at your clubs. And I remember I pulled over, called my dad from a payphone, and told him that I had made it.
Okay. Well, I've not been told that before, but I'll wear that hat with honor.
Yeah, no, I'm thanking you. You gave me confidence to have someone actually say, we want to pay you for 6 weeks of telling jokes. I mean, that's really hard to. Now, I had been paid different gigs before, but I never booked that much in one sit down. And also, it's when you start stand-up comedy and you know that you don't know if it's going to work, and you don't know if you're going to be able to make, you can make your friends laugh, but can you make strangers laugh in other cities? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and it's also a big jump to making even strangers laugh to making money at it, being a pro.
Right? Having someone say, I trust you enough to pay you. I trust this is going to work. It's a leap of faith by anybody at first when you don't have a ton of experience. So I appreciated your vote of confidence, and it really did help give me the strength. Later you were one of the first guys to feature me, one of the first guys to headline me. So I always appreciated that, and I always feel indebted to you for it.
Well, you were one of the guys that we could always count on. The audience always enjoyed you. You were young, enthusiastic, and always had very relatable material. But, you brought up a great topic. For the listeners, why don't you tell me, how'd you get started in comedy? I mean, how did you make that decision to quit goofing off on stage and actually start doing it?
Well, I mean, for me, isn't there a movie where somebody says something like, I've got nowhere else to go? I've got no other options. You know what I mean? Like, you almost have no other options at a certain point. I really think that people that become comedians often had no other real thing that was going to work perfectly for them. And so it had to work, or else they weren't going to survive as a person. There's all kinds of, I didn't want to have any one boss that I had to report to each day for 8 hours. That wasn't going to work for me. I'm terrified of getting up super early in the morning, which I didn't factor in all the radio you have to do. So that maybe I didn't think through.
Well, what age were you?
I was like 23 years old, and I was, just jumping around doing open mics every single chance I could. And, I had a little commitment to myself, which I think really helped. And I think in any walk of life, this could help. Anything you do is anything that's valuable that you do, you probably won't be good at immediately, or else it wouldn't be so pleasurable when you do get good at it. And I was sort of like, I'm not going to be too hard on myself my first 100 shows. I'm just going to go up, do my best, and not be too hard on myself, because this isn't going to be an easy transition. And I was right. I mean, God, those first 5 years, I don't know if I would wish those years on anybody. It's hard,
Yeah, and I've done an online comedy course, and I've written a couple books on comedy, and it's so true that a lot of people think you can fall into it and just kind of breeze through, but it's a lot of hard work. And I'm always telling people, young comics especially, that this is something that it is fun, it is creative, but you have to work at it. And I think that you made a good point that you have to just jump in and do it. I thought it was funny that you said that you didn't have any other choice. I've actually heard that from a couple people that were kind of, struggling with jobs or struggling with college, and comedy was kind of their breakout, and doing their open mics and getting up on stage gave them purpose. I don't know if that's overstating, but it, like you said, it gave them a direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, it seems like there's a couple different kinds of, there's more than a couple, but there's a few different jobs where there's the type of job where you don't think about it at all once you get off work. You work 8 hours a day, and when you're off, you're off. You never think about it. And that has some good things about it. And then there's the jobs where you think about it 24/7 and you're never off because you love it so much. And I think that's comedy for a lot of guys,
Yeah, and we should let the audience in on a little, we're going to talk about a little bit later in the podcast, but you're a very successful corporate comic. You've made a good living doing shows in the corporate convention area. You also do a lot of audience interaction. I think you'd probably, I'm sure you've proven many times, are probably a terrific professional MC because of the way you can relate and entertain and interact with an audience. But going back to the beginnings of comedy, do you remember your first joke? Or, I mean, you wrote some good, clean, relatable stuff, but do you remember how it started?
Yeah, my first joke was, I actually did it on television because I thought it'd be fun to just do it again, even though by then I was never doing it anymore. But my first joke, you might remember it was kind of random, but it was like, I just got the weirdest fortune cookie today. It said, a starship ride has been promised to you by the Galactic Wizard. And I don't want to shock anyone here, but fortune cookies are starting to lose their credibility a little bit. I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds that the Galactic Wizard would let me ride in his starship again? And it's just strange. And it was a fortune cookie I actually got outside my first set at the Holy City Zoo in San Francisco. Right before, it was the night that the Holy City Zoo closed. It was their final show. It was my first show ever. I basically closed down a club in my first night.
Yeah, but just being
that bad.
But just being a small part of the history of that amazing room where Robin Williams and others got their start is pretty incredible.
Really was. I know, it was the final show they ever had, and it was my first show ever. Another funny story about stand-up, which I don't know if you know this about me, but it's always been a hobby of mine to sneak into concerts, sporting events. I've snuck into Super Bowls. I've snuck into NBA Finals.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's always been a big hobby of mine as a kid. And I used to sneak into blues bars because I liked blues when I was really young. I was too young to get in. So I snuck in a lot of things in my lifetime. I've done, NBA finals, like the U.S. Open finals. I've now extended it on. Sometimes I do it with my wife and kids. I don't know if I should reveal that, but anyway, it's a hobby of mine.
That's a cool hobby, man.
Yeah, and I've it continues to this day. I have a lot of different techniques for sneaking into places. But my first time I saw a comedy show, I snuck in through the kitchen area with my girlfriend. I was like 16 at the Other Cafe in San Francisco.
Yeah, good club.
And the feature act was just unbelievable. And I remember thinking, how could anybody? I remember feeling sorry for the headliner. I was like, who could possibly I mean, this show's over. Like, this guy's so funny.
Who could follow that? Right.
Yeah. I'm laughing as hard as I physically can. I feel sorry when the next guy came on. I was like, I thought the show was done. I can't believe this is continuing like this. And the next guy comes up and just kills. And it's, at the time, an unknown, well, he wasn't famous yet, Jerry Seinfeld. And, that was sort of what inspired me to do stand-up. I was sort of like, wow, that looks like fun. You know?
Who was do you remember who the feature act was?
I don't. I wish I did.
But that's a great story. Because one of the things that, of course, as a producer, when I book a show, I have an opening act, a featured act, and a headliner, and I expect each of them to be funny. But as the producer, it's also my job to make sure that the person following this comic that's on stage now has to be able to top it. You have to take the audience on a trip. You can't go up in energy and then down. You know, for example, it would always be difficult to book someone like Stephen Wright because you have to have the right setup ahead of him, or it just to relate and take the conversation a little off track a bit, is if you have somebody that's really filthy and drops a lot of F-bombs up front, it can make it difficult for the clean, funny guys coming later. And those are things that producers have to think about each and every production. But seeing Jerry Seinfeld at age 16, I could see easily how that might influence you.
Yeah, and you know, Scott, you're one of the guys that thinks about that kind of thing. There's a lot of bookers out there that are still out there that don't really even consider that. And it's really fascinating because it's like, that's just not a good setup. You know, you don't want to, you know, you might love the music of James Taylor, you know, but you don't want to have him try to follow Metallica. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't, you know.
It's a great analogy, but I'm sad to hear that my peers aren't as aware of how important that is. Because as a producer, whatever it's a TV show, a concert, or a live stage show, and I've done hundreds of each, it's taking the audience, you know, it's all about the audience. I mean, I always treated the comics well and tried to, I was kind of famous for not paying them well, but I treated them well. And, but it was about, you know, making sure the audience not only got their money's worth, but wanted to come back. And you can only do that if you really work the system and make that flow of energy and comedy work. Well, you brought it up and I brought it up. So you're working a few stages. You hit the Holy City Zoo. How did you end up working for me? I'm sure you showcased, but do you remember?
Yeah. I traveled around and did guest sets and probably drove out there and did a guest set for you. And you were always nice to me. I always had a nice relationship with you. And in fact, I remember very specific things about working for you at your club. One of my favorite memories, and I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but it was a funny thing that we did. It was me, David Crow, and I believe Scott Shannon, or another friend of mine. The three of us were working for you. And the first day, it was like a Thursday, I think, we went snowboarding that day. And do you remember this or no? It probably doesn't stand out, but we went snowboarding. So we go snowboarding. That night, you asked what we had done that day, and we told you we had gone snowboarding. It was in the springtime. And we could tell you were sort of bummed out that, you know, that you weren't able to come with us, you know. And you're working all day. We didn't even think to ask the owner of the club to come with us because we figured but we could tell. So then each day we'd come into the green room and we'd tell you a different thing that we did that day, right? Just to kind of razz you a little bit, right? So we're watching it. So the next day we came in and we said that we went, it was springtime. We said that we went whitewater rafting on the American River, right? And we could see you sort of like, wow, that sounds like you guys are having a fun trip. We could see you're sort of getting kind of more frustrated, like, God, I'm paying these guys and all they're doing is this outdoor adventure, right? And then the next night we came in, we're like, we went, we went back up and went jet skiing, and we went on the Lake Tahoe area. I mean, we were just making up these things. The last night, this is my favorite part. The last night we we said, well, we went skydiving today. And before we could even finish telling you about the skydiving, you just snapped. You were just like, God damn it, I'll be honest with you. I would have liked to have done some of these things, you know? And you go, when I got into this business, you made this little speech. It was very heartfelt. And I liked, how genuine you were. You were like, when I got into this business, I was young, and this is making me feel old. You guys are out jet skiing and going skydiving and, snowboarding, and I'm stuck here doing this job. And you could have invited me. And we started laughing and told you the whole thing. The whole thing was a hoax. I mean, we pretty much hung out and watched TV at the condo every day. But it was just funny. Yeah.
That's a great story. And no, I don't actually remember, but I try to push the negative things out. But
that's good. No, actually, it was only because we liked you that we razzed you. It really wasn't. But there were a lot of fun times I had at your club. I remember you had a boat we'd take out on the river with the other comics, and you had a lot of fantastic comedians come through that I worked with that I learned so much from. And you'd have like a party afterwards or something, and it was. It was one of those, for me, it was the 90s. I know you talk on the show about the 80s, but this was more late 90s. In fact, I don't know if you remember this, but I was one of the co-headliners for your Millennium show.
That's awesome. I haven't checked. It's so funny is that I just did an interview with Ellis Levinson, and I've done some other kind of guys that work for me just a few times. And so I'll go back. I have all my booking books, and I will look to see when I booked them so that I could kind of relate in the podcast interview. But when it came to Cash Levy, I was like, man, he worked for me a lot. I'm not even going to need to check. And I knew you started off as an opening act, made your way to headliner, which takes years. So we have lots of opportunities to work together. But you working the Millennial show in 2000, I did not remember that, but I am not surprised because, as I mentioned, you always were so entertaining for the audience and a great guy to hang out with after the shows, which is important too.
I appreciate it. It was me. It was me. I have the poster somewhere. It was really a wonderful night. My parents came. I still have a picture of me and my parents in front of the marquee there. And it was me and, Kelly Moran was on the show, who I really became friends with that week. And you remember Kelly?
Oh, yeah. Great guy.
Great. I actually ended up, we met that week, I think, and we ended up working together a bunch of other times. In fact, we were able to do a military tour for a month in Japan, the two of us. And, we wrote songs for the tour and sang them together and all kinds of stuff. And then about a month or two after that tour ended, we lost Kelly. It was a terrible thing. He's really became a good friend of mine. Really a great guy.
Yeah, it's always sad that, especially me, because being a tad older, that some of the people I got a chance to work with are no longer with us. I was very blessed to be able to work with Soupy Sales and Pat Paulson, Graham Chapman from Monty Python, and some of these others that are long past. But there's a lot of not famous people, Kelly Moran, Glenn Super. There's been too many, if you ask me, but it is also a privilege that we at least had the opportunity, and the fact that you and Kelly became friends and got to tour together, and the fact that you were out entertaining the troops. That was one of the things I noted from your history, that not only did you become a very successful stage comic, I know that you went on and did lots of TV. You're now a really popular and successful corporate comic, but that you did get a chance to go out and entertain the troops. You went to Japan, but you did more than one military tour, right?
Yeah, a bunch of them. Went to Afghanistan, which was that was a real eye opener. This was back when there was a lot going on there. There was a night where we spent the night in a bomb shelter because people were lobbing bombs into the camp. I mean, it was You know, what I find with the military stuff is the more exciting the area is in terms of, different skirmishes or wars or whatever, the crowds just get better and better, Scott. So it's,
I guess when you're on death's doorstep, comedy is a nice relief. But I think that
right.
It's not only
they appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And not only is it so cool that you did that and got to work with our troops, and that's so important, but also being in a place that's getting shelled really puts the real in reality. You know,
That's true.
It's not like watching a movie or seeing it on a TV show. You're there in the middle of it. And even though the odds are probably still really slim if you're staying in a bunker, you never know if that one shell could have your name on it, as they say.
I know. It's really, I admire what those guys do. And it's funny because you go out there and they're so thankful for us just being there for a week. And it's like, God, all I'm doing is lending this thing I do for a living for a week, but it's really not that unselfish compared to what they're doing. So it's even awkward that they're even thanking us, but we appreciate what they do. And that's some of the most rewarding stuff you can do in this. You know, in terms of loving this job, I also love doing benefits and that kind of thing. Like it's fun I'd like to sort of, to be honest, transition towards the end of my career into, I'm still doing a fair amount of clubs. I have a podcast too. It's called Cashing In with TJ Miller, which is he's on Silicon Valley and different movies, that type of thing. And we have a podcast together. The premise of the show is that every week I have a podcast, and every week my guest cancels and TJ fills in. So just me and him.
Well, I knew about that. Wanted to ask you about it. I was going to do it towards the end of the show because I do want to make sure to plug your podcast. But what you're saying is that one of the great things about stand-up comedy, not just you, but all professional entertainers, is it does afford us an opportunity to give back. Whether it's
that's the thing, and that's the thing. I really would like to transition. You start to look at this career, and you're like, how could you transition? I'd like to transition into starting to do more like even setting them up myself. Maybe we could do this together and sometime. But because you know a lot more about promoting than I do and setting these things up. But I'd really like to do more benefits towards the end of my career.
Yeah, it'd be fun to help you with that. Yeah. And I totally agree. I still MC several fundraisers, and I put together just earlier, a couple months ago, I put together a large fundraiser. We raised almost $100,000 for special needs, adult needs facility. My own Rotary Club, I MC and help entertain at those, and we just had our big once a year fundraiser, and that raises about $60,000. And what it is you're able to take this gift of gab we have. You're much funnier than me. You're a comic, but we both have a knack of being able to interact with an audience. I mean, I know from knowing your act that you always have solid material to fall back on, but you are one of the few comics, and there's not a large percentage, that is very comfortable just interacting with an audience and getting a lot of comedy and humor that way. Did that come naturally, or did you learn that?
Well, one thing that happens, and there's two things I want to talk to you about now. You keep bringing up funny topics, but I think what happened, Scott, is my jokes were working pretty well early in my career in California. And then the further I'd go from California, the less the jokes would do well. And I remember I was in Pensacola, Florida. Scott, I was getting eaten alive out there. I mean, I couldn't buy a laugh. I mean, they were just.
It's like regional comedy, right?
Yeah, I mean, those crowds just did not see eye to eye with me on what was funny, and my jokes would work really well back home, but especially in a place like that, if I went maybe too deep into the South. Anyway, I remember I was working with this guy, and after a couple shows, he was like, "Hey, man, this is hard to watch. You got to do something." You know,
So he was having a little coming to Jesus moment with you.
I know, like he was really like, it was funny because this was a guy that would drink like a bottle of whiskey on stage every night. And he had a guitar and was doing this sort of everyman jokes, and it's fine. They loved him, and he was sort of a good old boy, and more power to him. He was killing, but he liked, we liked each other. He was trying to be my friend and just be like, hey, you got to try something different. This is never gonna. Those jokes are just not gonna work out there. And so the following show, I remember just like, okay, I'm not gonna do one joke that I've ever written before. I'm just gonna make stuff up and ask the crowd questions. And as that tour went on, because I think that was like 5 weeks I was out there, I started to develop that style where I would just ask the crowd leading questions, and it would lead into what few jokes were still working out there. And
but also, I'm going to interrupt you and just say that one of the things we learn in comedy, and I was good at as an MC, I never wrote material as a professional comic, but I was considered pretty funny on stage. But it was the quick interaction, the quickness, the sharp-wittedness that the audience doesn't expect, and you've honed that into an art form.
Yeah, well, no, you're a good improviser, and I realized it was fun too, and I really ended up enjoying it, and then so I could ask questions based on a joke I was about to tell, and just kind of
you were leading them into the humor,
stuff. And then started to get to the point where I didn't really need to even do any jokes some nights, and I started to enjoy that very much too. And I ended up actually David Crow produced the special. I ended up shooting a 1 hour special and selling it. It was all improv, pretty much.
Wow, that's unusual.
I ended up selling it. It was called Crowd Control. I ended up selling it. This is to Mark Cuban with Access TV, and he aired it for about 3 years, and it really helped me a lot because a lot of people would see it. It went into all those millions of homes, and people would see it, and they'd hire me to do whatever, any private stuff that was going on, because it was almost all improv, which was very unorthodox to shoot a special like that. So I was really lucky to do that. Yeah,
that's what I was saying as a producer, and I've done 3 TV series and some specials, and obviously worked a lot around the concert and television production. You never want a guy winging it. You want to know that he's got a set, that he has material to fall back on. He's going to have a big close. As a producer, if somebody came in and said, well, I'm going to, turn on the cameras, I'm going to go up and wing it. I would have just
terrifies them.
Yeah, I would have been frightened.
I know. That's why they were kind of giving out comedy specials, and people were like, well, we came out and saw you and we really laughed, but we don't know what you're going to do from night to night. So maybe you should just produce it yourself and sell it. And that's what I did. I was one of the,
that's really, so smart,
really helped me. Yeah. But I wanted to say one other thing, Scott. Another thing that really helped me is in terms of your influence, you were always a real proponent, and you weren't a snob about it. I know you liked a lot of different types of comedy. I thought you had a great taste in different types of comedians, but you early on were very, you wanted your opening act to be able to work clean, and I thought that was, you amongst a few different people were preaching that at that time. And I got to tell you, it's really helped my career in terms of being able to work clean, because there's so many more things you can do. You can work these corporate shows, or you can work, cruises, or you don't have to be like, oh, I have to cut all these F-bombs, and I have to, cut that one piece of material that offends people every time. It really ended up being very helpful. So I appreciated that too. I remember you were definitely a guy that you would prefer it if a guy could work clean, and I think that makes a difference.
Oh, well, I'm glad it made a difference in your life and your career. I did preach that pretty heavily, because I felt that my clubs were A rooms, and it was like university, and somebody was about to go on and get their PhD, which means go on and do television or get a sitcom. And many of the guys that worked for me did that. And, there's a few exceptions, but normally to really get TV and move on and have opportunities in corporate and specials, you have to be relatively clean. And when somebody would go up and be a lot of dirty, they go, well, I can clean it up. Well, then you're trying to self-edit in your brain while in front of the audience, and it doesn't always work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now,
I know. Yeah.
speaking of that, you took that clean comedy, and I know that you did Late Night with Craig Ferguson. You did Comedy Central. You were getting some TV spots.
Yeah.
How did that fit into your career? This was before you were doing corporate, right?
Yeah, I mean, I moved to Los Angeles with the idea that, if you can get a certain amount of television, then that's going to help, you market yourself. I don't know if it matters as much now with all the things people are doing on the internet, but at the time, even 10 years ago, before Netflix, I think getting on television was important to sort of say, hey, this is an established guy. And so I came down to LA, and I've stayed down here. And I think once I sold that hour, and then I also have a dry bar special, which has been really wonderful to my career. And that got shot like 2017 or 18 or something. And
yeah, I was going to mention dry bar because it was one of your later achievements, but everybody out there in the audience, go to Dry Bar Comedy and look up Cash Levy, and you'll find his set. But before that, what were you doing with Fox Sports?
Well, yeah, I came to LA and I started doing stuff on Fox Sports. In fact, I had my own segment called Cash's Corner, and I would make sort of funny commentary about what was going on in the sports world. And then I sort of was at a crossroads, Scott, because I got offered this sort of radio job in Houston and sports radio, and I also was doing the Fox Sports stuff. And it was like, so I want to transition and use my comedy to do the sports stuff. And I found that I just I like doing stand up better, and I also liked I didn't like being locked into one topic, being sports. In terms of now you have to be funny and talk about Shaquille O'Neal or whatever.
Right.
I like to come up with my own topics, and I kind of started to go away from it a little bit, where I was like, I love my careers and talking about other people. So I kind of, but it was good to get those television spots and get to understand Hollywood a bit. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting for me and hopefully for my listeners that here's a comic that was having success on the road, starting to get some television spots, and you really came to a decision where you could have, and a lot of people we know have gone off and done something different. They became a professional public speaker, or they went into radio, or they went into TV commentary, and you had that option. You were tickled with the opportunity to do television on a regular basis, but you knew it was going to make your niche much smaller. And I think you also, and you didn't mention it, but I would have guessed that when you're doing television and radio, you lose that immediate response, that love from the audience, that interaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that you can't replace it on TV. But you're right, those successes not only gave you opportunities and gave you that decision to make, which a lot of people don't get, so congratulations, but it also helped lock you into the industry as a professional. And speaking of sports, this is the perfect time to bring it up. Ladies and gentlemen, Cash Levy is the creator of one of the longest lasting earworms that my family's ever known. It's already been played on the podcast. I think I'm going to play it again at the end of this interview, but you had this great bit. You want to kind of explain it, or should I just tell how my wife still runs around the house singing it?
Yeah, it's just play it at the end and at the end of the show. I don't know where you got a clip of it, but it's I got to tell you, it was one of my first closers because it was so weird, and that's all I could say. And it sounds like it stuck with you.
Yeah, no, I have it. I recorded a lot of my shows and I'm sharing them on the podcast, whether it was live stage shows, special events like Laughs in the Park, or my TV shows. And I have a set where you do the Sha-Sha song. And for everybody in the audience, Cash is talking about the crazy support that college teams get. And you just had a way of doing the cheerleading song, and it was Sha-Sha, 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 Sha-Sha. I mean, you're better at it than me, but it's so funny because 30 years later, if I mention your name to my wife, she's walking around the house singing the song. It's incredible.
And I was telling you, it's still once every blue moon. Like I said, I'll be in the Midwest or somewhere close to South Bend, Indiana, because it's, it's from the Notre Dame fight song. The joke is that there was a 90-year-old lady sitting behind us doing the fight song the whole game, driving us crazy. And I once in a while when I'm in the Midwest, I'll still like just do it, and I still enjoy doing it once every blue moon. It was nice when I didn't have to do it every show because, boy, if you think it's driving you crazy, it was really, hard for me.
It was your own worst enemy. That's funny. Well,
right.
Ladies and gentlemen in the podcast audience, after the interview, I always air a few minutes of material from my interviewee, and I will just edit in there the Sha-Sha song because it is so memorable and so Cash Levy. So thanks for sharing that permanently with my family. So we talked about television and Dry Comedy Bar and all your success as a corporate headliner. You've been doing corporate for over a decade. And then you more recently started this podcast, Cashing In with TJ Miller, right?
Yeah. We've been doing it for about 10 years now.
Oh, that long? Podcasting was just starting.
I know. And it's been a lot of fun. We have a very loyal fan base. We call them a 12 and a half because we joke we only have 12 and a half listeners. But they're very, we have things called cash phrases. You can go to cashphrases.org where we coin these phrases on the show and then use them later. And people really use the phrases, and so do we on the show. The show, you almost have to listen in the middle episodes, and because there's so many callbacks to things that happened earlier. But
it sounds like you're having fun doing it.
We're having a lot of fun.
10 years. It's not a weekly podcast, is it?
We've been doing it every other week. During the pandemic, we did it a bit more just because we were able to, but we did it virtually. But yeah, usually it's every other week now. And, the cash phrases are sort of like, let me give you an example. Like, we'll make up these phrases that, here's one, ecliptus interruptus. That's when you interrupt sex to go watch an eclipse, it's like
ecliptus interruptus. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. So, there's things like that where we come up with these funny phrases that mean different things. And it's fun because the people come up to us and they'll come up to me after the show and they'll be speaking another language. If you didn't listen to the show, they'll be like, people say, what was he talking about? But it's been a fun ride. And I'm glad you're doing the podcasting because the podcasting is it's a whole different world. It's been a really fun ride. It makes a lot of sense for people to be able to listen whenever they want. And, it can get a little more risque if it needs to, it's a great genre. I really have enjoyed it.
Yeah. For me, it was the quick story was I had written a book about my 40 years on the fringe of show business. I'm boring my listeners because they've heard this a few times. And Jill just laughed at me and said, "No one's going to read your stupid book, and you ought to do a podcast." I'm like, "What's a podcast?" Right? And did my research, and I launched in March of 2020. And it's turned into, it was really for me to reconnect with people like you and share the comedy and the stories from the 80s, 90s and on. But I also feel that now that I just produced my 100th episode that'll be out, before this one airs. And it's really becoming a history of stand-up comedy from what we call the rock and roll era of stand-up. And I'm kind of proud of that. It's been so fun talking to people, everybody from Will Shriner and Yakov Smirnoff to you and Ellis Levinson and Steve Bruner, people that may not know your names, but, tremendously successful stand-up comics. Well, everybody out there, make sure you check out Cashing In with TJ Miller, the podcast that Cash Levy is doing, and you're on Dry Comedy Bar. Now, anything in 2022 coming up that you're excited about? Any new projects?
There's some upcoming dates, I guess, that are down on the schedule right now. You come see me at the MGM in Las Vegas, April 4th through 10th.
Awesome.
Yeah, MGM. I'm at Appleton, Wisconsin at the Comedy Club there, March 17th through 19th.
Oh,
so I'm not sure when you'll air this. I'm just trying to.
No, but the good thing
for
is,
next year.
right. The good news, Cash, is that people that enjoyed this interview and maybe want to go out and catch a set still can see you live. And the MGM in Vegas, that's a great room to work, and working clubs around the country. And of course, you have Dry Comedy Bar. So there's really lots of ways to see Cash Levy performing. And I got to say, I was honored with the job of hiring you as a opening act, watching you develop into a very tremendously successful headliner. And now, these decades later, knowing that you've had a great career as a stand-up comic, as a television personality, as a corporate guy, and now a very successful podcaster, you really have to say that stand-up comedy was the right path for you. I'm going to go back to what you mentioned about how you could have gone off into sports and television. I think that where you are now has kind of proved you made the right choice.
Well, I appreciate it, Scott. I mean, I really only have one regret in my career, and that's not inviting you on our snowboard, rafting, jet ski, skydiving trip.
Great callback, buddy. Well, thanks so much for doing this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy some tremendous stand-up comedy and the Sha-Sha song. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Cash Levy on my great interviewee today. Cash, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Should I stick around after we finish and say hello? Yeah.
All righty. All right, ladies and gentlemen,
Okay.
Here comes the comedy.
Do we have any allergenic people up front today? Anybody? Yes, what are you allergic to, ma'am?
Dogs, cats, grass, dust mites, and pine.
I'm not sure you should be out this evening. I think some of those creatures might be out.
It's okay, I have my inhaler.
Oh, she just pulled her inhaler out. It's a unique moment for a show like this. I have my inhaler. I'm allergic to comedy too. One time I went to the funny farm and I sneezed the whole time because I'm allergic to goats. And they kicked me out and I couldn't go to the love pool. That's awesome. What happens to you when you see mice, rat? What would it?
Give me dogs, cats, grass, dust mites, and
Well, I don't know how you live here because there's dogs everywhere. I mean, I saw a cat walking a dog.
I have 3 cats and a dog.
You have 3 cats and a dog? Yeah, that doesn't seem like good house planning. She's like, okay, I'm allergic to stuff. Let's put them all in the house with me. Then I'll complain about it all the time. But I can get an inhaler and show it to 400 people. That's awesome. What happens to you? Is what happens? Do you blow up or you're nice, watery, sneezy?
Yeah. But I bring
Do you think your cats know how allergic you are? Maybe you should take that inhaler and spray them in the face. Instead of putting it in your own mouth, just start getting rid of the animals that way. Yeah, maybe you should carry mace. It doubles, yeah. Yeah, what's your name?
Yulene.
Yulene. Yeah, very interesting creature. There have been times tonight where this show has just felt like one big, cruel, practical joke. What a wonderful group this is. I had an interesting year, with snowboarding up in your mountains. That was fun. I love snowboarding. I love the lingo. The snowboarders are out there. They're out there shredding, getting gnarly. They'll yell things at you and you don't know what they're saying. This guy yelled at me. He's like, nice still fish, dude. Nice still fish. I'm like, gnarly torque feather to you. So the guy's like, awesome crab cakes. Excellent bean dip. They're very poetic. This guy came up to me in the forest. He's like, to shred or not to shred? That is the question. Whether 'tis gnarlier in the pipe to sever the slings and arrows about riches, fortune, by ripping an old school alley-oop gym bulking rail slide. Or to take arms against a sea of troubles by ripping a fat, grassy, revert half-carve. Aye! There's the rub, my gnarly, big-panted cousin. I didn't hesitate. I said, 2 half-pipes diverge in a wood. And I took the pipe less traveled by.
A lot of good football games today. This year, I went to my first Notre Dame football game. It was great. It was a lot of fun, but there was this old lady sitting behind us singing the entire game, driving us crazy. Every time the band would play, she'd pipe up. 90-year-old lady right in our ear the entire game, driving us crazy. The entire game. She's driving us crazy. I can't sleep anymore. I wake up middle of the night. She's hovered above me with a pom-pom. So I thought I'd bring the sickness to you people here tonight. You don't remember a word I say. One of you is going to wake up middle of the night. I think the Sha-Sha lady should have like a greatest hits album, you know? K-Tel presents all your favorite classics by the Sha-Sha lady. Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha. Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha. Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha-Sha. Now that was difficult. Give me a song. Give me a song. Huh? Duke of Earl? God, what century are you from? God. Ancient Egyptian music. Sing it now, Chuckle Monkey. What album can I find Duke of Earl on? Medieval Classics? How does that go? That's so low, though. Like, Duke, 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 Duke of Earl, Duke, Duke, Duke of Earl, Duke, Duke, Duke of Earl, Duke, Duke, Duke of Earl. Yeah! Woo!
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.